All right, Tyler. So it's a new year.
It is New
This is our
Year.
first episode of the new year. And it's January here in the Northern Hemisphere, which means we are in the dead of winter and it's very snowy outside. Have you been out to shovel
I was
snow
out
yet?
yesterday to shovel snow. I used a broom. I don't have a shovel.
I shoveled yesterday in the afternoon. I got home from work, and then again later in the evening, and then again this morning. I woke up. I was a good guy. I got up and I shoveled and cleaned off my wife's car. Being a halfway decent husband, earned me some brownie points.
I'm I guess in comparison, I'm a degenerate member of society because I don't have a scraper in my car. So
we
I have
live in the north, buddy.
so I sit in my car for 20 minutes waiting for my windows to defrost.
Oh man.
And B, I don't have to shovel my driveway or anything because I park on street parking. So
that's
they did
true.
it for me.
That is PennDOT's problem.
Exactly.
Well, welcome everybody to Life the Complete Story. I am Alex, and that is Tyler. We are your hosts, and this week we have a fun episode for you because we are continuing our walk through the fish.
We don't
And
walk with fish, we swim with them.
Well, mud skippers.
Well,
Am I wrong? We're not
No.
talking about them today, but am I wrong?
No, today we are talking about bonefish. and,
Bonefish, yes.
deep sea spiny eels.
Yes.
But first, let's start how we always do. Alex, today I found the article.
Yes, you did. You're special, little boy.
So today's article is from Science Daily. If you would like to open for me. Oh, I already have it open. Oh,
Oh, look at you.
it was published January 3rd, 2025. So, yes, yesterday in our recording time.
Yeah.
By the American Museum of Natural History. And this is kind of, so when you talk about evolution, one of the things that drives evolution is predator-prey interaction. So the prey has to evolve defenses to make the predator evolve new mechanisms to counteract those defenses.
Yes. That's how evolutionary relationships work.
And one of the largest evolutionary time periods in the natural history would be the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And for the longest time, we just kind of assumed that like these predator-prey interactions were what drove the Cambrian explosion. But now we have like hard concrete evidence that says that this is a thing that happened. So we're talking 517 million years ago. There was these invertebrates, probably worms, we're guessing. It's just the
Okay.
invertebrates. We don't exactly have the best remains to go off of in terms of like these interactions. But there is fossilized shells of a Cambrian tomatid species. It's called Lapworthella fasciculata
Okay.
from southern Australia. So we have 200 specimens of this fossil. And they're about a grain of sand big to about an apple seed big.
Tiny.
So tiny, yeah.
Yeah.
But under the microscope, we're noticing they have a hole punched into them, which we're assuming is made by some type of mollusk or worm. And we're realizing that the older, the younger the specimen, so the further down in the time period it is,
Okay.
the thicker the shell, which we're pinpointing to it's fortifying itself against this hole punching of this worm, mollusk, whatever it is.
Okay.
Which means that the predator has to develop a stronger punch or tooth or whatever it's using. So this is like one of the first times we're actually seeing like actual phenotypic modification to benefit a species in the Cambrian explosion.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a long time ago. So that's pretty big as far as like evolutionary like adaptations. That is where you get that natural selection where the brachiopods with thicker shells survive.
Right.
And so they keep kind of as we said, evolutionary arms race. As the brachiopods get thicker shells, the predator has to get a stronger punching mechanism, whatever it is. And then you just keep going until you kind of max out, or then you start evolving differently to be faster or hide better, all kinds of fun stuff.
Right, because at some point you just say it takes too much energy to generate, and that's what drives it. Its truest form is the amount of energy it takes to make the change, versus is it possible to make another change that uses less energy.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I
Yeah,
gotta say.
it's a pretty short article. Once again, it was published by the American Museum of Natural History in conjunction with the Australian Research Council.
Okay, so that'd be like, what would that be, like the Smithsonian, maybe?
I believe it is. It's not tagged Smithsonian, which is what confused me.
Uh-huh.
Or it's in New York. One of the two.
Let's give me a second. I can tell you. It is in New York.
Okay, that was my second guess. But with that, we'll move on over into our lesson for the day. Today, as we preface, we're talking about bonefishes and notocanthropus. A small preface before we actually get into the lesson. In the past couple episodes, we've done those species highlights, and we kind of go over each individual genera, species, whatever, within the group. So for the albuliforms we're talking about today, they all look almost identical. They're just found in different parts of the world. So we don't really have a point in covering them interspecies-wise. Second, the notocanthropus live in the deep sea. And as you know about the deep sea, it's one of the least explored places in the universe. So we don't have much on that one. So we're just going to give you your general overview like we normally do and move on from there.
Cool. Good stuff.
So, yeah, I guess I'll start with the albuliforms, Alex.
All righty.
PowerPoint. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
So, oops. These are known as, known as bonefish. Haven't quite figured out why they're called bonefish. Other than they can. They're a popular game fish in South Florida, as well as the South Pacific Islands. They include 11 species within 3 genera. So they are the closest relatives to the elopiforms we covered last week, which were the tarpons and the ladyfish and things of that nature. And they honestly look like smaller versions of them. But the only difference really is that these guys, their snout is over top of the mouth rather than like the mouth being at the tip of the snout.
Kind of an upward facing, how the tarpon and ladyfish, they have more of like an upward facing mouth.
Yeah. This one has like a nose, which is like a snout over top of it. They also have that modified swim bladder, that vascularized swim bladder that allows it to breathe air as well, which kind of helps in that survival in the brackish waters. All elopiforms, which is the broad superorder that the albuliforms and the acanthiforms, the elopidae, they all fit in this same general group.
Okay.
And that includes the eels we'll talk about next week. And this group has a letocephalitic larval stage, which means it's pretty much see-through, very like flat transversely or laterally flat, so it's like squished together. And they can be small or big. There's like some species have larvae that are like 3 feet long, with the adults like 8 inches. So it's kind of backwards in that matter.
Okay. I'm guessing most of that is tail.
Yeah. Or just like flesh.
Yeah.
Just fleshy appendages. And these have, these albuliforms, as you can see in the picture, they're silver with kind of like a blue or green tint to like their backside.
Picture. There you go.
Yeah, you can kind of see it up towards like the dorsal fin area. And these guys vary in size from about 40 to 100 centimeters, so topping out at about 3 feet long and weighing about 3 to 5 pounds. The largest one on record was caught in Florida, and it was about 16 pounds.
About 7.25 kilograms.
Yeah.
A little more than that.
And as I said, I'm not really going to go into the genera because there are 3 genera to the albuliforms. There's albula, there's nemoosus, and
The
Pterothrysis.
albula.
Albula has the most species,
Okay.
and the other two genera are monospecies. And the
Okay.
only difference is they live a little bit deeper down in the water column than the normal bonefish.
Okay, but they all occupy that's similar to where how the other local forms like the tarpon and ladyfish, where it's like brackish water, it's a saltwater kind of
Yeah, they all have
that
that same kind of
estuary sort
deal.
of similar location, but they're a little smaller, so they feed more on like benthic organisms like worms, mollusks,
Right.
crabs, shrimp.
I'll give you guys like the common names for these guys, but I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail on what they do. It's really the main difference is just location. There's no real like phenotypic differences besides maybe like coloration or patterning. So there is the silver striped jaw bonefish, the Eastern Pacific bonefish, the Cortez bonefish, the round jaw bonefish, the West African bonefish, the Korean bonefish, the threadfin bonefish, the small scale bonefish, the Pacific shafted bonefish, the long jaw bonefish, and the generic bonefish, Albula vulpes.
Which I believe is, and it's not on this picture here, but I believe that's what this one is.
Yes, correct, Mundo. Alex, would you like to cover the notocanthroforms?
I can. Give me one moment here. So we're going to get into our notocanthroforms, which are it's an order of deep sea ray finned fish. So they lack a caudal fin. So if you look in the image here, you can see all these, that's all like the actual tail itself. They really don't have like the terminal fin like you saw in the albuliforms. They can be found worldwide from about 120 up to 5,000 meters in depth. So pretty deep.
That's about 13,000 feet, so over 2 miles deep.
Yeah, so they are well past the light zone of the ocean. So they are more elongated fish. They're not as long as the true eels. Various feeding strategies. A lot of them are detritus feeders. Some of them browse on epifauna, which epifauna by
They're like the microfauna that lives like in anemones and like
okay.
the individual members of colonies of like corals and anemones and stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and other slow-moving or sessile animals like mollusks, the echinoderms, anemones themselves, they also have that leptocephalic larva, which tend to float uh, near the surface of the ocean before they become adults and then go deeper. And this is where some of those larvae are actually larger than their adult forms. And they have two different families. The first is the Halosauridae. Let me switch to my next picture here. This is the Halosauridae, at least one species from the Halosauridae. They are more eel-shaped, and they're found in the deepest oceans. That translates to sea lizards, Halosauridae.
It kind of does look like a lizard if you look at it.
A little bit, yeah. There's only about 17 species of the halosaurs in 3 genera, and only a handful of them have been seen living, and they were observed by ROVs, remote operated vehicles, so like remote submersibles that were sent down into the deep waters. Their oldest fossils date back to the Cretaceous period, so they're not super old compared to a lot of fish. And the fossils bear very strong resemblance to the modern specimen with those whip-like tails, the long bodies, and having very large scales. And of course, the tail fin's greatly reduced. They tend to have a larger mouth with a longer upper jaw than the lower jaw. And in these guys, the swim bladder is mostly absent. There's a couple species that still have it, but a lot of them lack it.
Which is fine. Like it makes sense in like something that's this deep sea. The swim bladder is an organ that's used to like regulate flotation and buoyancy within that water column. But since these guys are all like benthic organisms, they don't really have to worry about buoyancy. They kind of just they use those long pectoral fins to like glide across.
Yeah, they usually at this depth there's not a ton of food, so they don't move very quickly
Yeah.
because they're conserving energy, and it's also pretty cold, so they tend to be pretty slow. Most deep sea organisms are not very fast. The largest species is the abyssal halosaur, reaching about 3 feet long, living at depths of about 11,000 feet, so fairly deep. And of course, they are adapted to that deep sea life. They have a very sensitive lateral line system with pores running along the whole length of the body. So if you remember us talking about that lateral line system, senses vibrations in the water. And when living in areas where there's really no light, you need other ways to sense what's happening around you. And these guys are actually able to regenerate their lot if they lose their tail, like some reptiles do. So that's pretty unique among the fish for sure.
Yeah, there's a
But
word for that.
get what it is off the top of my head.
I don't remember.
Forget what the technical term is for it.
Anyway, moving on.
Moving on, as we said, there's 3 genera of halosaurs. There's the Aldrovandea. They occur in Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans, reaching about 55 centimeters, roughly 2 feet in length. The Halosauropsis they live a good bit deeper, living 1,100 to 3,500 meters. That is the abyssal halosaur that I talked about. They are the only member of that genus. And then the halosaurs, which is just a generic genus, which contains most of the rest of the species. Which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9 species. So roughly half of the total species. And they live all over. There's the Galapagos halosaur, the Andaman halosaur, Gunther's halosaur, the Sahara halosaur, the Madeira
Madeira.
halosaur, Madeira halosaur, the goanna fish, the albatross halosaur, which is like Eastern Pacific Ocean, Ridgway's halosaur, and the Chinese halosaur. So they're spread out a good bit. And then next we have our Notochanthidae. Tyler, if you want to talk about them, these are our deep sea spiny eels.
Yeah. So these guys, they are, as Alex said, they are deep sea spiny eels. You can kind of tell based off the spines they have, where their dorsal fin, and like at the base of their caudal fin, it's more spiny. They have elongated bodies. Although, unlike eels, they kind of have a heavier taper to them. That kind of ends in that pointed tail.
So they're more fish-like until they get to that like whip tail at the end.
Yeah. In most species, the caudal fin is small to non-existent, with the anal fin being the most prominent. That caudal fin being like the actual tail fin, correct?
Yes, that'd be the one that's on the end of the tail.
Yeah, which is non-existent in most species we covered today. They feed on mostly invertebrates that live along that seafloors, mollusks, echinoderms, anemone, things of that nature. In this grouping, this is where the larvae are oftentimes considerably larger than adults in that leptocephalus form. They get about 6 feet long, where the adults are only about 8 inches. And there's 4 genera with about 14 described species, although the genera Tellurus is only known from those leptocephalitic forms. We have yet to see an adult form of it. But I'll go into those genus. As a genera, we have Lipogenus or Lipogenus, which is a monospecies, which is the blackfin taperfish. Lives in the Benthic deep sea off the east coast of North America, as well as the southwestern Pacific near Australia. There is Polyacanthonotus, which has about 4 species. The Polyacanthonotus africanus, so I'm assuming that's just the African spiny eel or something of the sort. They don't really have a familiar name. The long-nosed tapirfish, the Bahamas spiny eel, the smallmouth spiny eel. And the other genera is Notocanthus, and that has the majority of the species in this group. About 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if I count it correctly. The Mindanao spiny eel, the Notocanthus aeronti, which doesn't have a familiar name, Notocanthus bonaparte, which is the short-fin spiny eel. The snub-nosed spiny eel is Notocanthus chemnitzi. The Arabian spiny eel is Notocanthus indicus. Notocanthus lacodavensis, diviensis, Notocanthus sexpinus, which is the spiny back eel, and Notocanthus spinosus, which is the Panama spiny backed eel. So that's what we've have as like discovered species. There's probably more out there for everything we've talked about today, since they are such deep sea organisms.
It's very difficult to identify a lot of these deep sea organisms, because especially something like this, where a lot of them have very similar body styles, and you don't get to see a lot of them. Because I'm not sure how many of our viewers and listeners know we know less about our oceans than we do the surface of the moon. So especially as you get to the deep sea portions of the ocean, there's a lot that we don't know, a lot of species that we don't see. We may only have seen once or twice. So it is quite possible that there's a lot more of these that we just don't know about.
Right. That's going to cover our lesson. It was pretty short today, just because we just don't have a lot of information about some of these species yet. So we'll go into our regular segments. I've been yapping. I'll keep yapping. I'll go into my amazing species for the day. And there we go. The wild camel for the day. That is today's amazing species, critically endangered, almost extinct in the wild, actually. The scientific name, Camelus ferus. We have a decreasing population trend, reaching about 950 mature individuals in the wild, and they inhabit the desert regions of Mongolia and China. Their last assessment was June 2008, so it needs updating. Before that, in 2007 and 2002, they were critically endangered. Even before that, in the 1990s, they were initially vulnerable, but eventually became endangered, and now they are in that critically endangered status. Since they have a population size reduced by 80% within the last 3 generations, so about 45 to 50 years, I believe is the generation length.
Yeah, I'm trying to look and see if there is a generation length, and
I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing one.
IUCN Red List today.
I'm not seeing one, so it may be something that they're not certain. Yeah, there's no generational length on here.
So this is based off of observations made during 5 expeditions in the 90s. And these are continuously hunted by local populations, whether that be nomads or just normal residents that go out and hunt for sport. They have threats of residential and commercial development. As you know, China's one of the largest populations in the world. So that continuous expansion to house all their people, provide commercial necessities for all those people, as well as industry to, provide that, create money for those people, whatever you want to call it. Also, they're kind of transforming the desert into a green space for farming in China. Plus, hunting is a big factor, as I said, as well as mining and quarrying. Sometimes those deserts have a lot of ores underneath of them. It is a local and national sport, hunting / specimen collecting target, as well as a local food source for a lot of those local populations. I'm assuming those are mostly nomadic. A lot of people in these areas are nomads, kind of travel throughout the desert from place to place.
Yeah, it's difficult to stay in one place in the desert.
Yeah. Luckily, however, we do have some land protection in these areas. That typically means there's like some wildlife refuges or national parks that prohibit hunting or trapping in these areas. Mainly the Great Gobi Reserve A is in Mongolia, established in 1982. And in 2000, the Arjun Shanlop Mer Nature Reserve was established in China. Plus, we have a lot of captive breeding programs throughout the areas, mostly in Mongolia. That's going to cover my amazing species for the day. Alex, I'm tossing it to you for our most wanted for the day, and you picked
Absolutely.
a good one.
I did. So my most wanted for today is a aquatic plant called hydrilla. Uh, it's kind of a genus of aquatic plants. One of the one we're looking at primarily is the hydrilla verticillata, or also known as the water thyme. Native to Asia, Africa, Australia, grows, of course, in freshwater ponds, but it has a very high resistance to salinity compared to a lot of freshwater plants. Um, they grow about 1 to 2 meters with leaves arranged in whorls about 2 to 8 around the stem, each leaf being about 5 to 20 millimeters long and about half a millimeter to 2 millimeters broad. And they have little spines, kind of serrations along the leaf. It is primarily monoecious, which means it has both the male and female flowers on the same plant, which aids a lot in their reproduction. So it resembles a lot of, or there's some other aquatic plants that it resembles a lot, which are the
LOD is the big one.
Yeah, LOD is the main one. Sorry, this one, the name when I scrolled over it, it came up as different. But yeah, primarily Ageria or Elodia densa, which is the large flowered waterweed or Brazilian waterweed, and Elodia canadensis, which is native to North America. But the issue with hydrilla is it is allelopathic, which means it actually produces compounds that inhibit growth, and these are of two species of hornwort, which are other aquatic plants. And then it, the reason it has become a problem primarily in the United States is because it was released into waterways due to the aquarium trade and is now found in parts of southern Canada, and then primarily along the east and central part of the country, like Connecticut to Texas, down through Florida. And it's become a problem because it has a combination of things that make it such an issue. One of them being herbicide resistance. It's very resistant to herbicides. It has very high growth rates, as you can see in the image here. That whole patch of plant there, all those stems, that is all hydrilla. And then as well, it is very adaptable within the ecology, easily dispersed because it's able, if you cut those stems, it's able to grow like rhizomes from the base and then spread that way. And then it doesn't really require a lot of resources to grow. So that has a big combination of things that make it very invasive. And the reason it is invasive in the locations it's at is because it has a very high photosynthesis rate, which you think would be good. But the problem is during the daytime, it is such a high rate that it actually depletes a lot of the dissolved carbon dioxide in the water, which raises the pH of the water and then has a lot of the higher concentrations of oxygen. But then at night, that oxygen is used up in what's called oxidative phosphorylation, which is a plant process it uses to make its ATP. Excuse me, sorry. And then, which then, as that carbon dioxide is replenished, it then lowers the pH. And those who really don't know a ton about kind of anatomy, like especially in across biology, pH, the acidity of especially water is very big. It can cause a lot of problems when the pH is raised or lowered too much, either made too basic or too acidic, because in all living organisms, their processes require specific pHs to occur. Like the enzymes in the body work best at specific pHs. For example, this enzymes in your stomach work best at that very acidic pH, whereas in the blood, it's a slightly basic, close to neutral pH. So in aquatic ecosystems, they can't really get away from the water, so those pH fluctuations are much more impactful because of that. And especially in Florida, it's become the most serious aquatic weed problem for them. And it's pushed out a lot of native aquatic plants. And as I said, it is resistant to a lot of herbicides, even broad spectrum herbicides. So it is really displacing a lot of native populations of pond weeds and those different aquatic plants and grasses that cause problems because it's really a lot of the native fish and microorganisms that use those native plants are now losing a food source, which has become that becomes an issue because then it works its way up that trophic pyramid to really impact the ecosystem as a whole. Now there is some management; it can be controlled by some herbicides, but not a lot. It is really well controlled by grass carp, which I believe they're actually they're native to Asia, which so you kind of have an invasive going after an invasive, but
that's typically how this goes.
Yes, but the grass carp, as we've talked about in the past, is part of that Asian carp group, and it's not good, not great to have. And there's other biological controls such as different insects, such as the Asian hydrilla leaf mining insect or fly. Sorry, so it is a fly that I'm guessing the larvae, as they swim in the water, will actually mine into the leaves of the hydrilla plant and kind of increase its photosynthetic activity, kind of kill the plant. And there's a bit of a close-up of the leaves and the stem there for you.
And they made it really hard to tell the difference because the plant's called hydrilla. The scientific genus for that weevil, or that not the weevil, the leaf mining bug is what's it called here? I just saw it.
Hydrilla pakistani.
Yeah, hydrilla. So we go hydrilla usually eats the hydrilla. That's how you'll remember it.
Yes. Yeah, but it's still a problem because like the tubers and the rhizomes of the plant can lie dormant for years until they then grow back. So it's very difficult to control these. But that's about all I have for them.
Do you talk about some of the chemical?
I can talk a little bit about the chemical controls. Where trying to see where I had it here.
We got fluoridone.
Yeah, that is the one that they're resistant to.
Yeah, that's the broad spectrum that we were talking about earlier. They're now resistant to it.
Yes. But some they're able to use, it's called endothal is the one, which is used for both terrestrial and aquatic plants. But the problem is it affects plants across the spectrum, not just the hydrilla. So it's really the biggest thing is trying to dig up the plants, which is very labor intensive.
That's a gross looking compound, though.
Yeah, it is a very crazy looking compound. So the hard part is it's very difficult to control this. So it's just continuing to spread throughout both pond and river ecosystems throughout the eastern United States. And the problem too is as people use boats through these areas, they're able to break off bits of the plant, then it can float downriver, or if they get stuck to the boat, they move from water system to water system, it can then be transplanted. But that's why in a lot of areas it is highly recommended to clean any boats before
similar like a zebra mussel situation.
Yes.
That's how a lot of these like water-based, these freshwater-based invasive species work is they mandate like boat washes each time you take it out of the lake.
Yes. The The only plus side to this plant, it is really good at bioremediation. It's a very good accumulator of heavy metals like mercury, cadmium, lead. So it can help clean up water systems, which in some cases is good, especially if it's like a river system that's become
Decimated
very,
by fracking.
yeah, fracking or other sort of mine issues, mining problems, or even lakes.
AMD, things
Yeah,
of that nature.
yeah, acid mine drainage. But in some cases, like some lake and pond ecosystems, they it's the organisms that live there like that kind of turbid water, that cloudy, um, cloudy water. So it in those areas it may not be as good of a thing. But now that is all I have for the hydrilla. That it's a big issue here in the eastern coast of the United States, but it has been seen in California, so it could very well spread across the country.
Right. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Life, the Complete Story. Once again, I was your host, Tyler, joined by my lovely co-host, Alex. As always, we ask you to please like us, follow us on Spotify, leave a comment, tell us what you thought about today's episode, subscribe to the page on YouTube, like the episode, hit that notification bell so you get notified each week when we drop a new episode. And when we drop our clips too, those come out at least once a week. Follow us on Instagram at Life Complete Story. John's doing an amazing job, as I said, getting those clips out, as well as those amazing species each week. I don't think we got an amazing species this week, but last week I think was a bird or something of that nature.
I believe so. I forget off the top of my head. I can look real quick and tell you.
Follow us on TikTok at Life Complete Story. Our Instagram handle, I don't know if I said it yet, is Life Complete Story. I follow the page on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. That's where I post articles that I find throughout my week that I find interesting, that kind of relate to either something we've talked about in the past, something that we're going to talk about soon, or that are just generally cool nature-related articles.
Last week was the pygmy slow loris, which is a small primate.
Yeah, it fits in that lemur. It's like a relative of
Like a
lemurs.
lemur. Yeah, it looks very similar to the eye.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yeah, not same kind. It's got like the real small head with the real big eyeballs, but
yeah, I was gonna say it looks nothing like an eye.
And it's not
fingers.
It's not quite like the eye, but it's similar. It's those small lemurs. Yes.
I think I got it all. Oh,
yeah.
Send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com. Let us know what we can do better. Let us know what you want to hear. If it's something that we already covered and you want to hear more about, maybe we can make a short form or long form video on YouTube to provide more information, something of that nature. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. We kept it kind of short, not much to talk about, but don't worry, next week's going to be a doozy. We're talking about the true eels.
Yes, there's a lot more in there.
Forms.
Yeah, as we get through the fish, especially when we get to more of the freshwater fish, we're going to have some longer episodes. We may actually have to break some of those up a little bit, those different orders.
Yeah, the poker forms are going to be about 2 months long, don't worry.
Yeah, it's going to be,
ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a doozy.
Yeah.
But we'll see you guys next week. And as we always say,
keep learning, learn something new. You never know what you'll find interesting. As we said, I've been Alex. That is Tyler, and we'll see you next week.